Hope everybody's having a good day today. I decided to do a live more for newer people to my channel than anybody else because if you've watched any of my past shows on this channel, then you'll understand that I highlight on this channel a lot of military doctrines, equipment, geopolitical situations between the two different sets of elites, as well as the different countries they control, and a whole slew of other things, and including the objectives of our eastern foreign enemies. Okay, so the reason I'm doing this is because this is like the umpteenth time that I've seen all these things about, Russia said they're going to do this or do that or the other. Well, no. If you've watched my past stuff, then you'll understand that, the whole notion that, there's going to be some huge, scale nuclear exchange where we get wiped off the map is just completely ridiculous. The Word doesn't say that, and I'm talking about the Bible. The Word doesn't say that, although it mentions the city of Babylon being destroyed in 1 hour. You know what happens to the vast majority of it? It gets overrun by armies, troops, foot soldiers. Of course, their chariots or their tanks, their vehicles. Why would that be? Because China and Russia want to take the resources and farmland intact. Plain and simple. They want the resources and the farmland intact. They don't want farmland that's contaminated with cesium and all sorts of other nasty radioactive particulates, okay? They don't want that to happen, nor do they want to destroy any of the resources aside from just the land itself that they're trying to extract. They need to be able to mine or cut down timber, establish a logging industry, mining, oil and gas extraction, whatever. They need to be able to do that without the fear of contamination. Now, for those of you who watched the video that I posted during, my little rotation in the community tab, what Russia's really doing and what's being said about them are two entirely different things. It seems anymore, and this has been going on for a long time now. This isn't a new development. It seems like every other month, the flavor of the month is nuclear war. While it is true that they will use some nukes, they're not going to use but maybe a few dozen, and the vast majority of those are going to be like tactical nukes. Why? Because they don't want to destroy their objectives. If you've read the book of Jeremiah, it's pretty clear that we're invaded by armies. In fact, it's so just important in that book that it is actually mentioned multiple times that foreign armies invade Mystery Babylon. Multiple times. So the word is pretty clear on that. As for fire, the word fire in the Bible is often synonymous with war. Just war in general. War in the general sense. Of course, that can be a mixture of conventional and nuclear, because I've conceded to the fact many times. I've even had dreams about it. I posted my dreams like at the very beginning of my channel, and I've conceded to the fact they're going to use some nukes, but it's not going to be like a total nuclear war. That's not going to happen like that. It is not going to happen like that. I think nukes are just overly hyped. They really are. They're overly hyped. And all that's going on with Russia, when you get down to the meat and potatoes of it, is that they did a limited incursion. And when they had their summit in Samarkand in Uzbekistan, they had decided, the Russians, they were going to meet and consult all their allies, China, Iran, etc., etc. They were going to meet with all their foreign allies and tell them that they were going to bring the conflict to an end. Well, what does that mean? That means that they're going to do these referendums, like the video I posted. They're going to do referendums to where these different territories with ethnic Russians, like the Donbass and others, that they captured, are going to vote to join Russia, so that when Russia acquires those territories and they then become part of Russia, that means that if Ukraine is attacking those areas, then they attacked Russia proper, with their actual armies, the Ukrainian armies on the ground. That means that they attacked Russia proper, and Russia would be well within their rights under international law that they've tried so hard to follow. They would be obligated to defend themselves because those territories will then be part of Russia. Okay? That video I posted really clearly lays all of this out. And that means that they're going to bring the conventional conflict to a close. They're going to stop, using their limited incursion and their limited objectives. They're going to remove those because those were a hindrance to them just bringing the whole thing to a close. They could have defeated Ukraine in a week or less, probably in a few days, had this actually been a full-scale war. Russia hasn't really used but maybe 5% of their whole military capacity in conventional terms. Not nuclear, just conventional. Well, they have a lot more resources and personnel they could bring to bear. They don't have to do a draft. It's not what that's even about. It's about bringing the conflict to a decisive conclusion, conventionally. Meaning they're going to, their army was fighting with one hand tied behind its back. So when they remove the self-imposed barriers that they put in place on themselves, they put these things in place on themselves because they had limited their objectives, and they conducted a limited incursion whereby they only sent in these 70 or so odd battalions of troops, and that's not very many compared to the forces that Russia actually has in their entire armed forces, which is a grand total, even if you include their paramilitary of 300,000 internal troops that they relabeled as National Guard now. They have 3.2 million if you're just taking their active duty and reserve militaries. Then there's 300,000 paramilitary forces, parallel military troops. So it's 3.5 million. So these 70 battalions are only 63 to 65,000, which is not much at all in the grand scheme of things. Russia, being such a freakishly large nation in land size, needed to have strategic flexibility. Why? Because they share a long border with these NATO countries. They also have other borders that they have to potentially, protect, including their Arctic borders. So Russia, being such a humongous country and also taking troop rotations and such into account, they felt that a limited incursion was the way to go. But they still have a lot more resources they could bring to bear that they haven't even used yet. So I think that, that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to use conventional forces to bring the whole conflict to a close, because they're going to remove their self-imposed barriers imposed upon themselves from a limited incursion with limited objectives. They're going to untie the hands of their generals, their military as a whole, and they're going to let them bring this to an end. Because they more or less, up until this point, were beholden to the LPR and DPR in the Donbass. That was their whole key objective, was to shield the Donbass, liberate the Russian, ethnic Russians, demilitarize, denazify Ukraine. So, did they do that? Well, by and large, yeah, for the most part, they did. But the conflict as a whole is not going to end if they continue doing a limited incursion with these limited objectives. Because you can't just, freeze a conflict and be like, okay, well, our limited objectives were realized, so we're just going to stop fighting you guys. You can't do that when you still have a hostile enemy right next to you, because they're not going to stop fighting. Ukrainians made it clear. Their objective was to retake Crimea and also capture the Donbass. That was Ukraine's objectives. Russia's objectives: liberate the ethnic Russians and do those other things I just mentioned a minute ago, and shield them from the regime in Kiev. Well, okay, they've done that, but you have to eliminate the enemy forces, or they're just going to keep fighting you. So that's why they're doing this referendum. Because, like on that Duran channel, they're right about Putin. He is very much about, trying to present himself as one who follows international laws. He's very legalistic in his approaches. But, in the real world, you can't be like that all the time. Because in the real world, you have people that don't follow the rules. Western nations do not follow international law, okay? That's been the case for many, many years. Even the conflict I went to, Iraq, that was a violation of international law. We just unilaterally decided to invade. We didn't follow international laws, okay, when we did that. So, I'm saying that to say this. I'm not agreeing with international laws because the world is an evil place. It's an evil place. But I'm telling you what I told you so that you can get into the heads of these people, okay? So that you can understand how they think. That's how they think. I could care less about any of that garbage because it's all worldly garbage. But I'm telling you these things so that you can understand how those people think and why they do what they do. Okay? So context is an important thing when we look at these things. Context is everything. Context. So as far as a contextual understanding of these things, you had to understand what I just told you about the whole, international law garbage and how the West, are a bunch of hypocrites. They don't follow it. But then you have Russia trying to follow it, but you can't follow it in a real world where other people don't follow it. It's all garbage anyway. International law is bunk. It's a bunch of BS. But I'm telling you that so that you understand how these people think. Now, Putin and Xi do want to take over the West. They do, because they're evil too. We can't forget that ever. They're evil. They have their own plans for world domination, okay? Apart from what these Western elites want with their Great Reset. The Eastern elites have their own plans. They want to take over the West. colonize it. But incrementally, some things still have to happen before that even occurs. There's things that have to happen. Not just according to the Bible, but according to just common sense. There's things that have to happen before it gets to that point. So, looking at all of it objectively, there's a lot of things that haven't happened yet if you're going by biblical prophecy. But also, likewise, the physical reality is much different than how it's being portrayed in media, okay? The context of what he said in his speech, I think a lot of that got taken out of context because, to me, it's no different than things that American presidents have said. Trumpty Dumpty said that he has a bigger red button on his desk than, insinuating that he's talking about the nuclear stockpile. He said he has a bigger red button on his desk than Kim Jong-un. And Kim Jong-un's threatened to nuke America how many times? Not just him, but his dad, Kim Jong-il. They both threatened to nuke America repeatedly. Never happened. These leaders bluster and make threats all the time, and they always say they're not bluffing. Trump told, Kim Jong-un, he's not bluffing. But nothing came of it, okay? And it's not going to, because nobody in their right mind is going to conduct a nuclear war, okay? A full-fledged one. I'm not saying nukes will never be used. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that in the quantities to where it'll be like a full-fledged nuclear conflict, that's not going to happen like that. It's not going to happen like that. It'll be a mix of small amounts of nukes, as I've always maintained, and humongous conventional armies. The Bible is pretty clear on the armies, okay? Jeremiah is clear on it. It repeats that multiple times in Jeremiah 50 and 51. It's repeated multiple times that we're going to be invaded by these big armies from all sides, all sides. The word all means all, like every, inside and out, all the way around. We're going to be invaded by armies, okay? Humongous armies. Will nukes be used along with that? Well, yeah, sure. They'll use nukes, but they're only going to use them when they feel that is absolutely necessary and that it's not going to interfere with their overarching objectives of capturing the farmland, the resources, and everything else they want intact. Because let me tell you something. People don't go to war without a reason, okay? And that includes invasions. You're either going to war because you're trying to defend yourself against an aggressing nation or whoever, because wars can also consist of factions, duking it out, all kinds of things. Look, tribes and whatever else. You only go to war when you're trying to defend yourself, or if you're trying to invade to get concessions. You want concessions, your objectives. So they're not going to just destroy America like that with nukes. No, they would go to war with us because they want concessions. They have objectives that they're seeking to meet. Resources, farmland. China wants to be food independent, and Russia wants to rule the Arctic with all of its resources, which would make them extremely rich. They would have an abundance. They would be rich because all the other nations of the world that needed these resources would be trading with them, making them exceedingly wealthy. You don't go to war without a reason, folks. So, as far as the issue with Ukraine, that is a limited incursion for now, which is rapidly becoming a situation whereby the limited incursion is about to come to an end. Now, when I made my predictions for the hell of it, about the food, fuel, economic, financial collapse, and also, the food and fuel collapse. We're experiencing it right now. So, and have been really since the end of August. I mean, I was pretty accurate on that part with the numbers I had, but as far as the Ukraine issue, yeah, that's it's gone on a few weeks longer because I predicted that would be a situation by then too. So we're at a point though where it's finally looking like it's about to end, and with this referendum, that would bring it to a pretty quick end because if they're attacking Russian soil with armies, like trying to invade it, because that would then be an invasion, right? Because they're trying to see, to Ukraine, to them it would be like, okay, we're still trying to take our territories back that were once part of Ukraine, but to Russia, then it'll be like, okay, you're invading us, bro. You're invading us. So we have to stop you. That's why they're doing a referendum. And I told you about the state of mind of these leaders and why they do what they do. Putin included. So he's finding out that in a real world where your enemies don't believe in the same things that you believe in the real world, you eventually gotta fight dirty, I guess. I guess that's the best way to put it. I don't know how else to put it. Because he's finding out that, again, I'm talking from me personally, I think it's all a bunch of BS. International law is BS. It's all BS. But I'm saying from the standpoint of Russia versus the West, the Russians are finding out that the West does not honor the same things that they honored as far as their agreements, okay? So Russia is figuring out that, in the real world, they have to do things that are on the same level as their enemies. Okay? And you know me, I don't take sides in this. I couldn't give a shit about either one because they're all evil. They're all evil. East and West, they're both evil. Either equally so, or I'd say maybe the East is a little bit more evil because considering the fact that they're the 10 kings of the East after World War III are the ones that bring in the true New World Order of the beast system. It's not going to be a Western NWO. It's going to be an Eastern NWO. And those people never knew Yeshua Messiah, so they're going to be exceedingly cruel. They're going to be exceedingly cruel, evil. So that's the situation. So if they do their referendum, whatever, what have you, that is going to be the situation that unties the hands of the Russian armed forces to where they're not sticking to limited objectives, where they're not going beyond the self-imposed restrictions that they put on themselves. Their armed forces are large. Nowhere near as big as China, but they're large nonetheless. They're bigger than ours if you take reserves and paramilitary into account, along with their active. So Russia could easily commit forces that would be big enough after how they've ground the Ukrainian military down to the nub. They could commit forces that would be big enough to bring this to a conclusion. Okay, they could. Easily. They're either going to sweep the nation of Ukraine and just get it all over with, knock them out, or, there's other ends that could come to this. Like, there could be a coup in Kiev, or, Z, their leader, Z, as in the letter Z, he could flee. He could flee the country to one of his many mansions he has in Western nations. He could flee. There's all kinds of ways it could end, So there's going to be plot twists, as I call it. Plot twists. Unexpected things are going to happen in the future that people aren't even expecting. Things that not even the news is going to be right about. And the news is wrong a lot of times anyway, but I'm saying that what's reported and what's actually going to happen in many cases will be entirely different. People will be surprised how things happen. What does that mean? Well, that means that all these, crazy narratives or hype or whatever else it is that come out, it's not necessarily going to be what actually occurs. Things that occur are going to be much different. And the way they occur is going to be much different than how it's presented. I've seen this nuke war stuff go on for a long, long time now. It seems like I said, it seems like every other month, all these stories are coming out about how Russia or China are going to nuke us or whatever. Well, yeah, in an all-out invasion, they'll use some, but they'll be the small tactical nukes. I don't see them using these humongous city killer nukes when they'd create an enormous amount of fallout that would potentially hinder their plans. I mean, sure, they might use a small handful of those, very small, but it's not going to be no full-scale nuclear war. It's going to be with armies. The Bible's clear on that. And even reasoning is clear on that when you understand that these people want the land intact. Why would they irradiate their prize? Their grand prize is to seize control of the land. Why would you irradiate your grand prize? It just doesn't even make sense. They have so many other weapons that they can use. I mean, like just the combo of knocking all our satellites out of the air, which they have all these anti-satellite weapons, just the ability to knock all our satellites out of the air, combined with a cyber attack that shuts our grid down, combined with electronic warfare systems that would totally just eviscerate any emergency communications or anything else we would have that would survive a cyber attack. And I don't see that happening, but even if it did, the electronic warfare that Russia and China have would be a redundancy. It would just be a redundancy to shut down anything that could survive the tandem cyber and anti-satellite weapon attack. If your enemy is deaf, dumb, and blind and can't respond because they can't communicate and thus cannot coordinate and organize any sort of effective response, then why? Why would you need to nuke their whole land? China, we know China and Russia have troops in our country. We know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. Folks, they're not going to nuke their own troops. It just doesn't even make sense. That's why they'd use a small handful of nukes, if at all, if that. But I've had dreams where, some of our cities got nuked. Yes, I believe that there will be some used. Some. But it's not going to be no full-scale nuclear exchange. That's not going to happen like that. The Bible's clear on that. And, the facts are pretty clear on that because there's foreign troops all over our country. They're not going to nuke their own troops. They might nuke some cities and, some installations, whatever. They might do that, but they're not going to nuke the whole country because they would destroy all their assets and troops they have here. All the equipment that they've been importing since the CCP owned our ports for the past 20 years. All the stuff they've imported, they're not going to destroy all their vehicles and troops that they've got here. They're just not going to do that. They would only use them where they felt it was absolutely necessary to do so. I just see things getting overly hyped in the news, and it's just like, man, And I'm not taking a shot at anybody. I just extremely, severely disagree with the stance that that America's going to get wiped out completely in a nuclear exchange. It's not going to happen like that. It just doesn't make any sense from a realistic standpoint because of all the foreign troops in our country. It also doesn't make sense from an objective standpoint, where they have objectives that they want to capture intact. It also doesn't make sense from a biblical standpoint, which says we're going to be invaded by massive armies. That's why what I do on this channel is so important. If people would just understand how important this is. I'm trying to help people navigate a war, an invasion. Not everybody would survive, of course, but at least, the information I give out gives people a chance. It gives people a chance. A chance. This isn't a fear-mongering channel. This is the damn furthest thing from it. I offer solutions here. I offer solutions, I couldn't care what some pansy cuckold, channel says about channels that actually offer solutions, because, I've been made aware that, there's some really, really false things said by certain people about channels that offer solutions. Okay? These are the types of channels that don't want you to defend yourself, which is totally wrong from a biblical standpoint, as I've explained using Scripture, even Scripture in its proper context. These are they who take the wrong stance against self-defense, which is ultimately it's a heresy to do so. It's heresy. If you all know what heresy is, because in speaking against self-defense, you're saying those things about God, and you're also saying that God contradicts himself, which he does not. He does not. And also saying that God changes, and he never changes. He never changes. If he was for it when David slew Goliath, if he was for it when Joshua led armies in a campaign of self-defense against, the peoples that currently had lived in ancient Israel, the Amalekites, all the ites, that wanted to destroy the Hebrew people, if he led them in a war of self-defense, then if he also had Nehemiah building with one hand, rebuilding the Jerusalem wall, armed for self-defense in the other hand, if he had the disciples armed, if Yeshua Messiah himself said to sell your cloak and buy a sword, and that two is enough, meaning, have two defensive weapons, a sidearm and a primary, makes sense to me. If he said those things, and he's the Son of God, if God was for self-defense at any point, he's always for self-defense. Did you know if someone breaks into your home at night and you end up dealing them a fatal blow, you're not guilty. The defender, the word defender used, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. Yeah, how about that? Yeah, so self-defense is a proper part of the Bible as a whole. Don't people understand that the saints and the beast are going to have a physical kinetic war? A war. It says that. It's not a spiritual war where the beast wipes out the saints. That's impossible. Because if they belong to Yeshua Messiah, how can the beast overcome them if they're saints? Saints. How can the beast overcome the saints in a spiritual war? He cannot do that. It thus has to be a physical war. Because to overcome them in a spiritual war means that he marks them and makes them his. He cannot do that. If they belong to Yeshua Messiah, they can't be plucked out of his hands in the spiritual sense. So, that can only mean it's a physical conflict. Yeshua Messiah returns to destroy the beast and his armies. Destroy them. He's not coming back to give hugs, be Barney the dinosaur. No, he's coming back to kick ass and literally take names in his book of life and book of judgments. Yeah, Yeshua Messiah is a warrior king. He's not some pansy. No, there's a doppelganger of him that makes him look like a hippie, pansy, weakling that lets people kick his ass all over the place. No, that's wrong. That's evil. That's evil. Yeshua Messiah is a mighty warrior king. Just because he came as a sacrifice for sin doesn't mean that people should be twisting it to mean things it doesn't even mean. No, that's heresy. People have twisted it. They've got it twisted. It's heresy to say that God isn't for self-defense. Total heresy and lies. Lies. Read Revelation 21:8. See what God says happens to liars. Cowards. Cowards. If you're an able-bodied man and you don't defend the weak, if you don't defend yourself, you're a coward if you're an able-bodied man. Key word being able-bodied. All cowards, liars, dogs, sorcerers will all be cast into the outer darkness. They won't make it into heaven. They'll be cast into the outer darkness. Revelation 21:8. It's pretty clear on that. Pretty clear. You know, self-defense, if it's in the Bible, then it's always applicable. God was never against it because he never changed his mind, because God never changes. Never. So, I felt a powerful urge to come on here and talk about some of these topics because they seem to be hot-button issues. I'm not singling nobody out. I just want to make that clear. I'm not singling nobody out for nothing. I'm just repeating a stance that I've always maintained, and I'm giving you the reasons why I've maintained that stance. They're solid reasons. Very solid reasons. No. Russia, China, whoever, they're not just going to just nuke the whole country. It doesn't work like that. It don't work like that. Sorry, but it doesn't work like that. It's not in the Word, and it's not what the reality lines up with on the ground either. The reality stipulates that there's a lot of things that are going to happen first before we even get invaded, and the Bible stipulates that as well. The physical reality is very much lining up to even meet prophecy. It's meeting prophecy. Even in Jeremiah, it says that there will be an internal conflict in Babylon. I'm paraphrasing. It says violence will erupt, conflict will erupt between multiple leaders, plural, like factions. Sounds like Syria, folks. Sounds like Syria. Babylon's pretty clear that that'll happen first after a collapse because there will be famine. There's going to be hardships. Then there's an internal conflict between multiple leaders, plural leaders. Then we get invaded by armies, massive armies that invade from all directions, including inside too. CCP properties, Chinese Communist Party properties, CCP properties, and all their allies too, like Russians and North Koreans and Pakistanis and Iranians, all of their allies, Belarusians, they're all going to be on those properties too. Venezuelans, Cubans, Nicaraguans, they're all going to be on those properties too. Because China, of course, is going to coordinate with their allies and let them use their properties as staging areas. Just like there's Chinese armies all over the place too. Armies and paramilitary. So there's military and paramilitary of China all over. So it's going to be humongous. It'll be the biggest invasion in the history of war. It'll be the biggest invasion in the history of warfare, and it'll top even Operation Barbarossa in World War II. So let me see what people are saying here. Hope everybody's having a good day. I have to push buttons to see the chat. Okay, why is it doing this? What's up, HN? How you doing? Well, yeah, HN, there have been some biblical changes, but it has nothing to do with self-defense. Self-defense has always been part of the Word. And if you have the Word written on your heart, you'll know that. But nothing was changed having to do with that. The same stories are still the same stories in the Word. Only some of the wording has changed. Some of the wording has changed. And I know specifically what some of those words were that were changed. I hope you're not here trolling. Hey, Jennifer. How you doing, my love? First love me. HN, yeah, those things, I feel like they're the mark of the beast because they definitely spread the way the mark in the word would have spread. They can be used for buying and selling because they're already being tested. See, the mark of the beast had to come from somewhere. It doesn't just pop out of nowhere. You have to have a working system in place. And the mark of the beast system had to come from somewhere, meaning it doesn't just, the false prophet doesn't just show up one day and just pull an entire working system for the whole world out of his ass, you know. It has to come from somewhere. So I feel like these are the beast marks. These are the beast marks. These abominations are the beast marks. So there's nanotech already in those things, among a whole slew of other things. But that nanotech, in tandem with the 5, along with the 5, and you know what I mean by that, that technology links people together. I mean, you're already seeing people that took it showing up on people's phones. People can see that those who have taken that abomination show up on their telephones. They show up as a Wi-Fi link. That means that information can be stored within the nanotech that's in the bodies of those people that have partaken in it. So it easily can be used for buying and selling. It's real. It's real. I think a lot of people are in denial about that, and they say it's a precursor. No, it's not no precursor. It's only just the beginning of it. It's still the mark, but the mark had to come from somewhere. The system grew up together. The mark and the 5 both grew up together. That should be a signal to everybody that it's the mark. The 5 to the G and the snake venom grew up together. That should be setting off red flags, red alarm bells, whatever you want to call it. Red alert. It's a red alert that those two things came up at the exact same time. They link people together. It's beyond just suspect. It's like a dead giveaway. It's irrefutable at this point. We're seeing the origins, the very beginning of the mark system, the mark of the beast system. It's exactly what it is, because it had to originate somewhere. It all has to start somewhere, right? False prophet doesn't just show up one day and just say, okay, everybody, just pulls a whole working worldwide system out of his ass and say, okay, everybody, line up, get your beast marks, come on, let's go. It don't work like that. It wouldn't be that obvious, because the word says that deception and delusion are going to be a key facet of the end times. Delusion and deception. Delusion and deception. So people wouldn't take it unless they were deceived into taking it. Well, what better way to deceive people into taking something like that than to tell them it's good for them and it's going to cure something, okay? Think about it. Think about it. Really think about it. Ain't no precursor. It's just the origins. It's the origins. We're only in the first phase of the rollout of the beast mark system. Now, when Babylon's destroyed, the rest of the world will be using this system, even after Babylon and the West are taken over. The true beast system of the 10 Eastern Kings and the false prophet and the beast, that'll rise right after World War III, and they'll already have the groundwork laid. When you look at these Asian nations, especially, all these nations in Asia, these Asian nations that rolled out the 5 before even we did, they've already got it. It's already in use. That technology is already in use in a whole number of ways. It's used as a weapon. It's used as in civil society for all kinds of technology. They've rolled it out first before anybody. They've perfected it by now. These Asian nations. So after World War III, and they've defeated the West, they'll already have the working beast system in place. Okay? Even after the West is defeated and occupied by China and Russia and their allies, the East, the nations of the East, will have already have perfected that whole beast system technology. So they've already got it to where when World War III is over, they'll have it perfected, and it'll become exceedingly obvious that that's what it is. So, what are people saying here? Let's see. I hate having to push all these buttons. Hey, Blue Eyes and Jennifer, and who else is in here? Oh, yeah, Blue Eyes, they are. Like China, South Korea, Japan, those 3 nations are like insanely far ahead in robotics, AI, especially China in AI and robotics. But Japan, they've always been into robotics. So is, South Korea's gotten into it. Germany and France, surprisingly, have robotics, but they don't use theirs in a military capacity. Not like China and Russia have adapted theirs to. See, Russia has robotics too, but they use theirs more in a military sense. China, though, they're building androids, like full-fledged human-looking androids. China is. So is Japan. But China in AI leads the world. They're a leader in so many technologies. That's why the Red Dragon, is going to be the world superpower all the way till the end times. I mean, till the very end at Armageddon. We're stuck with them till the end. They became the world superpower 5 years ago. From the time I made this video, they became the world superpower when all their military industrial factories that they've been building since the 90s came online, adding to their already, sizable military industrial complex, making it possible for them to have production rates that haven't been seen since World War II. Also, they have the biggest armed forces by far in the whole world. They have the most people under arms by far, by a long shot. They're leading in all these different technologies, electronic warfare, directed energy weapons, lasers, all kinds of lasers. They've got hypersonics. They've got all of this stuff, anti-satellite weapons, cyber warfare. China is the biggest danger that the Western world has ever faced. Okay? I'm just going to say it. So that's real. That's the reality. As bad and big and bad as Russia is, China is even more powerful. People should be concerned about them deeply. And the dragon gave his power unto the beast. Who is like unto the beast, and who can make war with him? In the spiritual sense, the dragon is Satan. But in the physical sense, that manifests as China, the world superpower, the world hegemon. Think about it. And Satan is in firm control. Satan is firmly in control of that nation. They worship Xi Jinping as a god, a little g god. China is a secular, humanist, despotic police state regime of the worst kind, not seen since Nazism. Seriously, I know they're a communist police state, but Nazism, they have the same fanaticism as the Nazis had. Okay, they have camps, they have Lao guys, they have it all. Social credit score, all of it. There hasn't been a stricter, more evil totalitarian state since the Nazis, and maybe Stalin's USSR. Even Mao Zedong was pretty evil, but China, I'm talking about in the modern age, the 21st century. China is like the closest thing to the Nazi Germany that I've ever seen in the modern age. So, yeah, they're the world's superpower. I'm talking about the CCP. I'm not talking about the Chinese people. They're good people. I'm talking about the regime that runs China is the most evil regime I think I've seen or heard about since the Nazis. Yeah, that's the other thing about the CCP, Cheeto. They've been creating genetically engineered military projects. Like they have these ape-human hybrids they've been working on. It's horrible. It's horrible. It's evil. See, the cloning technology can be used to splice animal genes with human genes, and the Chinese have been working on that, trying to create ape-human hybrid soldiers. Ape-human hybrid soldiers made in a lab. China is also leading the world in genetic engineering. It's horrible, though. It's really evil. It's very nefarious what they're trying to do in creating these hybrid soldiers. They have androids, and they're working on hybrid humans. It's horrible. Yeah. What do I think about Switzerland? Oh, well, I mean, it's in Western Europe, and, Switzerland is going to be surrounded by Western nations, other Western nations, that are going to have extreme duress this winter. Extreme problems of the worst kind. Food, energy, collapse of economies, finances, all of it. The West is finished. It's finished. I would say that Switzerland is going to be affected in very similar ways as their neighbors, Germany and France and Italy and Austria. Switzerland is surrounded by nations that are going to have some of the hardest times not seen in a long time. I mean, this will be worse than the Great Depression. It'll be total anarchy or near anarchy. It'll be bad. It'll be really bad because when you have people that are desperate to feed themselves, stay warm, whatever else, they're going to be doing a lot of dangerous things to get what they need. It's going to descend into total breakdown. People aren't going to have jobs because their factories will be forced to shutter if they haven't already been. This is deindustrializing the West. I'm talking about Western Europe. Germany was a pretty strong manufacturing economy. When I was an exchange student, many years ago, 2001, and I went to Germany for a summer, that was a very, very modern, very industrialized, very high-tech nation. They had bullet trains, and it was really cool to see the mixture of medieval times blended with modern times, like ultra-modern times. You would see the big industrial car manufacturing facilities and steel mills and things like that. You would see these big industrial plants. But then you would see in these German towns, they would look really like old school. Like they would have the stucco and the timber homes and the tile roofing, and it was beautiful. You would see old medieval castles, but then you would see rail tracks with where the bullet trains, the ISA or the ICE trains, would go by, which is Germany's bullet train. They were very fast trains. Germany had a lot of high technology, even back, way back then. And, now it's a shame. It's truly a shame to see such an industrial powerhouse like Germany just completely going to absolute shit. Germany was a beautiful nation. I mean, it really was. When I was there, like 20. It'll be 21 years ago now. When I went there 21 years ago. It was beautiful. I mean, very modern, very technologically advanced, and now they're going to absolute shit. So is the rest of Western Europe. So this winter is going to be really nasty for the Europeans, but likewise, whatever happens to Western Europe is going to affect North America as well. And by proxy, whatever affects North America is going to affect Oceania, which is Australia and New Zealand. The whole Western world is going to collapse and descend either into civil conflicts like what you'll see happen in North America, or it'll just descend into outright total just destitution and chaos of all kinds like you'll see in Western Europe. It's all, a lot of it also has to do with the temperament of the people too. Americans, by and large, have really horrible temperaments, and they're not going to be happy when they can't feed themselves, and that's going to cause them to do dangerous, violent things. You already see an epidemic of violence in this country already, of the worst kind, where people just go in and like annihilate a store clerk just to steal what's in the register. It's horrible, horrible. People just throw their lives away because they're either that desperate or they're just that thrown off in the head to where they don't even care. They're total sociopaths that don't care about other people. It's gotten to that point. And that's real. That's real. That's reality. And it's going to get worse. So this winter is going to be a horrible, horrible time for the Western world. Russia's sitting pretty. China's sitting pretty. China hoarded all this food. Russia had a bumper crop. China claims to have had one, but I just don't know about that. But China did hoard most of the world's food. Food for the whole world, China got over half of. Just China. We're not even talking about other nations in the world. China got over half of all the world's food when you average it all up. All of it. Talking about the crops, the big crops, corn, wheat, rice. I'm also talking about the pork and the beef that they've accumulated. All of it. You average out the percentages of the world's food supplies that China's taken, China's going to be sitting pretty because they've been preparing for war with the West. They want to take over the West. Same with Russia, because Russia is basically China's main ally, along with their other smaller allies. But they want to take the West over. And the West has done a great job at destroying itself, at tearing itself apart, making itself weak, ripe for the takeover. Some people say that's part of the plan for the so-called G reset. You know what I mean by the letter G reset. So if it's part of the plans for that, well, they just did a great job at making themselves extremely weak and ripe for a takeover. And there's no viable system to replace that which they destroyed. They're tearing down the whole grids of nations in the West. They're tearing down their energy resources, food supplies. You can't run a nation like that. You can't run anything like that. They have no viable replacement for the systems they're destroying. So when China and Russia kick our ass, it's a foregone conclusion that they've kicked our ass because we have no way to put up any sort of resistance against it. We've weakened ourselves to the point where even these Western elites are going to suffer. Like it says in the book of Jeremiah, the king is going to be captured, the royalty, the upper crust, and they're going to be punished. They're going to be in Chi-Com Lao guys with the ordinary Americans that go there too. Those who don't defend themselves and resist, But But the nation as a whole is not going to be able to defend itself from conquest by China and foreign nations. That's a foregone conclusion of all of this bullshit, this reset garbage that they're, pushing. I've heard people like Poplar over there on his channel say that he thinks the Western elites are working for China because it only would make sense because China would, they would weaken the West for China so China could just come in and waltz on in and just take over. I don't agree with that. The West and East are very different sets of elites. I don't believe that the Western elites are working for China. But it seems, I understand it looks that way, but it's not true. The West and the East are two different elites, and I've shown that in my East versus West differences, where I explain the origins of where these elites came from in both the Eastern and Western nations, and how they came to be, and how they came to control their areas. So while the West is destroying its own area with even no viable replacement, because these people that run these Western elitist organizations and NGOs, they obviously don't understand the laws of cause and effect. If you have no viable system that's viable, the key word being viable, digital currency is not viable, it's just digits. Without electric, you can't even use it. They have no viable system, no physical system to replace that which they're tearing apart. Think about it. If you're gutting your own militaries, who's going to protect you when the Chinese take over and the Russians take over? Nobody. These elites included in that. They're not going to have nobody to protect them when the Chinese and Russians come to collect. It only makes sense. So it's just all it's madness. It's all total madness. There's no viable replacement. In the West, there's no viable replacement. While these Eastern nations are not affected by the Western reset because they have their own elites that want to build their nations up while the West tears its nations down. They've hoarded food. They've had bumper crops. They've built their militaries up. They don't believe in green energy because China's extremely polluted. They don't give a shit about no green energy. They don't believe in the rainbow people. They don't believe in none of that garbage. No, China and Russia are totally different. They have totally different policies. They're all about building up while the West is annihilating its own self. How stupid can it be that we've done this, that we've allowed this to happen in the West? It's beyond idiotic. And the people, it all starts with education. Because by and large, our people aren't very educated. Because if they were, they'd have tried to, look, the people like us, like me, like you all that are hip to all this, that are alert to all this, we're spread out. And we really can't do anything as just a small, spread out group of people. Because idiots in large numbers who have poor education don't see what we see. They don't see it. They just don't see it. They're blind. They're blind. It's the blind leading the blind. That's all I can say about it. It's the blind leading the blind right into a trap. They don't do anything. They think they have normalcy bias, too. They don't think anything's going on because of all the window dressing. I talked to Jennifer last night about window dressing, meaning that they take all these precautions in stores to make it look like things are better than what they are. They remove whole sections of shelving, and then they spread items out and front the items in the front of the shelf to make it look like there's more than what there really is. Because we're living off of the remainder of whatever stocks they had. Okay? That's the reality of it. It's going to become obvious to even the most blind people, the most normalcy-biased people, that something is extremely wrong when they run out of those stocks. For now, they're doing a lot of window dressing to make it look as if things aren't as bad as what they truly actually are. When you got rotting produce, you got all this bullshit, you got all this stuff that has to be thrown out because it goes out of date extremely quick. No, that's not normal at all. Not compared to what we've always been used to, it's not. No, that's very abnormal. Normal. Yeah, that's very abnormal. So it's getting to a point where it's going to become more and more obvious to people that something's extremely wrong. And the people are going to start having basically a conflict over the limited resources, which was one of the causes of my documentary of the Syrian-style factional conflict. They were fighting over resources and many other reasons, but resources and food played a key role in all that. It was very limited. There were even famines in certain areas, especially near the front lines. Things got really bad. Really bad. But let me see what people are saying here before I get going. I've been on here a minute. Yeah. This damn sure ain't no fear-mongering channel. I offer solutions here. I used my expertise as a combat veteran, as a soldier. That was my career choice. You know, the oldest career in the world is soldiering. Soldiering is the oldest career, being a soldier. You know why? The very first human settlements in recorded history, the first job was being a soldier, a guard for the villages. The very first human settlements that ever existed, the very first job was guards. Those are the first soldiers. That's the oldest career in human history. So I use my experience, my expertise as a former combat soldier in the Army, the old Army, not this new woke, depleted, piss-poor, garbage leadership ran woke military. I'm talking about the old professional military that we had at one time. I was honored to be a part of it back then when we were professional. But now, no. But I use my experience from my old career as a soldier. I was a career soldier to basically help my brethren, my sisters and brethren in Yeshua, to be able to use that knowledge to better themselves, No, I'm not sitting there, just feeding people a line of BS like so many. Like I said earlier, these pansy channels, these heretic people that sit there and tell you shouldn't defend yourself when that's a line of total bullshit. Even according to the word, it is. But I get very passionate about that. And no, shit's not a curse word. There's no list of words that are curse words. That's just a totally human construct that was created. It might be perceived as crude, but it's not a curse word. It's a synonym of feces and excrement. And also, the word ass, damn, bastard, they're all in the Bible. So if they're in the Bible, I don't feel that bad about using them. I really don't. Also the word bitch, it's a female dog, okay? I mean, people get bent out of shape over the goofiest things, I mean, you could call it crude, but it's not cursing. It's not cursing. But, yeah. No, Blue Eyes, it's not. Soldiering is older than that because the first human settlements had guards. I don't think prostitutes came along until a little later after they established money. Because remember, the first human settlements, they didn't have money. They traded, they bartered, The very first human settlements, they didn't have money. Money came along later with the advent of kingdoms and empires and things like that. But that's funny though. But soldiering was the first career. That's the oldest career. Because they had guards for their ancient human settlements. The oldest, little city-state settlements had guards, and even the villages that predated those had guards, and guards were the first soldiers. So you had to defend your village or town from either wild animals or rival villages that wanted to take what you had. So you had to be able to defend your community. So the guards were the first soldiers. Let's see. I have to keep pressing buttons. I'm sorry about that, everybody. It's annoying. Just want to see what people are saying before I get going here. Hey, Rebecca. Great to see you. Great to see you. And letter A. A, good to see you. And Cheeto, good to see you. And Philip C. Well, yeah, Philip C. It's a reunified Germany. I was, it's a great country even after reunification. I've been to Eastern Germany. It looked fine to me. It's hard to believe that was even a communist nation at one point. The eastern part of Germany that used to be East Germany. It's hard to believe it was even a communist country. It looked fine to me, and that was 21 years ago. Throughout the 90s, they did a lot to bring East Germany, or the former East Germany, up to par with the West. They had reunification in 1990, but throughout the 90s, they did a lot. They spent a lot of investments and money, just money in general, to bring the former East Germany, which was just now Eastern Germany. They spent a lot of money in investing into Eastern Germany to bring it up to the same standards as the West, to where it actually looks pretty good to me. I mean, it looked a lot like the western parts of Germany I've been in. I couldn't even really tell a difference. I could see when we were on the train and we actually crossed the old border line between Eastern and Western Germany, which is now just the demarcation between different German states. Like they have states like America does, because the Eastern German states and the Western German states, you could see the remains of the old border wall that used to be there between East and West Germany that divided the two parts of Germany into two different nations. But you could see the old former remnants of that wall, which was like when we were on the train, it was like the demarcation between the state of Hessen and Thüringen, which are two German states. Thüringen is in the east and Hessen is in the west. But that's when we crossed by rail, like you could see the old remains of it. But yeah, it's pretty neat. But yeah, Germany, like all in all, east and west parts of Germany seem rather much the same to me. I couldn't tell, but maybe a few differences. Like when we went to Eisenach, you could see the old stained glass windows in the train station where it showed like the Trabant, which is an old East German car. Like they had a Trabant factory in that city where they built the Trabants, which were like like these real, like they're almost like a Yugo in a way if I had to compare it to something. I mean, but they looked even older. Like they're like they had like a 50s or 60s look about them. I can't remember when the first Trabants were made, but I guess if you're talking like 80s models, they look probably a lot like Yugos in some ways, the old Yugos. But yeah, brings back memories when I was there. I went as a student. The only time I went back to Germany was when I was a soldier and we were crossing on our way to Kuwait. We stopped on our commercial flight in the airport at Leipzig. We stopped at the Leipzig International Airport, and we took a layover flight from Leipzig all the way to Kuwait City International. And Leipzig's in Eastern Germany. That was the only other time I'd been back to Germany. But aside from that, most of my memories come from when I was a student. Yep, memories. Well, hey, Big B, what's up? Well, everybody, thank you for coming to my live today. You all have a wonderful day.